Hello, Gareth here, and in this watercolor lesson we're going to be painting this beautiful evening sea scene. So this place is called Ehime and it's on the island of Shikoku in Japan, and I went here for my summer holiday. I had a really good time, but it was very hot and humid. So anyway, this photograph was taken from my drone, and so we're looking down on the fishing boat. So try to be careful with your angles when you paint the fishing boat. It's easy to forget, and I actually did forget. But anyway, I did correct it. So let's get on with the painting and have some fun. So the first thing I'm going to decide is my horizon line. So I'm looking at my photo and the horizon line is just above the middle. So I'm going to do it there. So this is the middle and it's just above. So very roughly, well, lightly, let's draw that horizon line. And I'm going a bit wrong there. There we go. So next I'm going to draw the boat. Now the boat is in the middle of the photo. That's not such a good place. I'm going to put it about here and I'm going to have it fairly high up. So first I roughly get the shape of the boat. This photo was taken with my drone, so it's looking down on the boat. So we've got a very interesting perspective, and I'm not going to do any details. I can add them quite easily later. This bit, the cockpit, I think it's called the cockpit, is near the front, very near the front. And I think this is even a bit longer. So use this, I'm not sure what it's called, kneadable eraser, because it's very soft on the paper. And continue. Try and get this angle right. That's very important. Yeah. Yeah, it really is long at the back. This might be a little bit too big, the size of the boat, but we'll go with it. Then there's something here. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's some net. And then this, I have no idea what this is, but it's very interesting. Oh, and maybe we've got a board going across here. I'll add that. Okay, that's good. It's very high up, possibly too high. So what I think I'll do is I'll make the horizon line a little bit higher, because I don't want the islands that are going to go here and the boat clashing. I mean, it might work, but I've decided to keep them separate. So the next thing is the land and the islands. So that bit, and then there's a smaller one here. I love this particular little bit of, well, it's not an island, it's a rock. It's very nice. I especially like this little bit at the bottom. And then we've got a gap make sure your gaps are different, not the same length, because it will look unnatural. And then we've got a big piece of rock here, and then another one here. So I said islands, but really they're rocks, I guess, but they are very big. I wonder when a rock becomes an island. They're huge. Okay. So, and then it's got this little thing at the bottom, which I like so much. And let's have a look at that. And that looks good. So I think now we're ready to paint. So I'm going to use a flat brush, and I'm just looking for a good one. Maybe this will be nice. So the sun is coming from here, so I'm going to have pure paper here, and I'm just wetting this area because I'm going to add yellow ochre, and I want it to be a soft edge. I'm not too worried about this being so wet. It's wet, but hopefully not soaking, yeah? Okay, dab that. Very important. Please notice when I use my rag, beginners often don't use their rag, and then they put a very wet brush onto some paint and they get those terrible cauliflowers. So always use your rag. It acts like a brake, and it stops your brush being too wet. So I'm going to start about here and then work towards this area. And it should get a little bit fainter. Can you see that? So that's really nice. The only problem is I wanted it to be white up here. So because this is a light colour, we can use some tissue and just erase it. So, and keep going here. You have to be careful with your light colours, they easily get contaminated. And yeah, got some whites coming in here. And then at the bottom here, a touch of alizarin crimson with a bit of this yellow ochre, and put that down here at the bottom. I think that looks quite nice. Maybe I need more yellow ochre here, so and I want it fairly watery. Like that. Okay, and I think we're ready now for blue. So I'm going to use this cerulean blue. I think that may be how you pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. And begin at the top and then go down. And it's really important we leave these white gaps. And beginners, they fill everything. It's like they're painting a wall. They've got to cover everything. And that impulse is so strong in beginners. But if you want to do a good painting, it's very important to leave gaps. So important. And that looks quite nice. I'm going to spray it. Remember, don't spray directly, spray horizontally, and then the drops fall down and you don't shift any paint. So the next thing is I'm going to use a smaller brush. I'm going to use my pointed oval, which I really like. I'm going to make a warm grey for shadows under the clouds. So that requires some alizarin crimson, a touch of this cerulean blue, a bit more, And it doesn't matter if a bit of yellow ochre gets in there, it will just grey it off a little. And I think that's looking good. Too watery, so I'll dab it there. And then look at that, it's quite nice, isn't it? We've got some lovely light colours here. Glowing, yes, it's glowing. So like that. And here too. And also a little bit there. And yeah, I think that's it. I think that's quite nice. This is beginning to dry. I didn't want that. So tissue is like heavy artillery. If you make a mistake, if you quickly get in there with the tissue, you can erase, not everything, but about 95% of the paint. So it's very, very useful, but you've got to be quick with it. And if it's important, if it's light, then it's very good to use. But if it's like a dark blue or something like that, this might not be so good in that situation. Look at that. I think that's really beautiful. Maybe this is looking a little bit too symmetrical here. So I'm going to try and destroy that symmetry by doing that, yeah. And then hopefully not quite so symmetrical. There are slightly dark areas, so I'm going to use, this is basically the same mix, red and blue, and maybe a touch of yellow ochre. I use a very limited palette, and because it's easier. And so there'll be a list of materials in the description box, so you can see what I'm using. Okay, and then just here. So the paint is still wet on the paper, and that's very important. But beginners often, as you might expect, can't always paint so quickly. And the danger that beginners have is by the time they've done something and they're moving on to the next stage, it's dried, and then they get the ugly cauliflowers. So if you are a beginner and you are a little bit slow, you might not want to do this final touch, yeah? It depends. If the paint still looks quite moist, then you should get away with it. But remember, I probably used my rag before I did this to get rid of excess water. Very, very important. Okay, now let's do the sea. So I probably should wait for this to dry, to be honest, because if I drop water on it, it will damage it, but I'm going to risk it. So if we look carefully at the sea, in my photo, what we've got here is like white, then yellow, then it goes reddish, and then it goes blue. And it's kind of like this angle, yeah? So almost 45 degrees. So first of all here, we've got just pure water. Then we've got yellow ochre. Don't want it too strong. So I can start here and then move in, and it will get weaker, yeah? And then go a bit stronger with this. And if I'm touching this, I have to be very careful, because if it's almost dried and I touch that, and this paint here is wet and this is almost dry, then this will shoot up into this and make an ugly mark. So, and if that happens and it's really bad, then maybe you can just wipe it out with tissue, yeah? So that's good. Next, my alizarin crimson. And then finally, blue. And I'm going to use phthalo blue. And maybe I'm going to use just pure phthalo blue at first, just to see what it looks like. Yeah, that is definitely too beautiful. So I'm going to add some red to this, and maybe a touch of yellow ochre, and then it's going to become a more serious blue. In fact, it's going to become grey. 3 colours, yeah? 3 colours tend to go towards grey. 3 primary colours. So now, if you don't do this fairly quickly, like I'm doing it, it's not going to blend in because this will dry. So you do need to try and do this fairly quickly. And then this stage where you blend in is also quite tricky. This is too strong with the blue, so I'm going to dab it, and now I'm going to blend it in. I go back down a bit to get some of that paint, and then I bring it back up, but I'm not bringing it all the way up. So what beginners will do is they'll go all the way to the top, and it will all end up grey, a bluey grey. And you don't want that. You want the yellow, you want to leave the red, and you want to leave this purple, and then down here a bluey colour. So down here I've got one of these bits of tissue, something like that. You can dab your brush and sometimes get it out. So some people don't care about it and just leave it there, which I think is fine, especially for beginners. You don't need that kind of hassle in the beginning. But as you get more experienced, you get a bit more fussy, and also you're able to be fussy and play around with things and control things a bit more. But when you're a beginner, it's far more difficult to do that, and you'll probably end up spoiling your picture. So I wouldn't recommend that. Just leave it and let it dry. Although at some point I guess you've got to get good at doing that. So there we go. Maybe it's a bit too dramatic, but I'm quite happy with it. It's got a lovely glow, which is what I really want, and it's got a nice gradation here, which is very interesting. So let's leave it to dry. Next, I'm going to do these rocks and this mainland. So for this, first of all, I'm going to do a dark colour. Then I'm going to add orange as a highlighted area. And then finally, I'm going to do the reflections in the water. So for this, first of all, mixing it up, you need a big brush. So this flat brush will do. So really I should do my light colour first, but there you go. So basically it's going to be a blue. I think these rocks are a little bit on the brown side, so I'll try and get it looking a little brown. So blue, red, more red, and then yellow ochre. This is phthalo blue. I really like it. It's a really powerful blue. So more yellow ochre. So it's gone brown now. Too brown. But then again, add a touch more blue to make it a darker brown. Oh yeah, that looks good. And using another brush, maybe this one, it's quite small, but I don't need a lot for this. I'm going to make an orange for the highlighted area. So we've got some yellow ochre and alizarin crimson. Ooh, it's quite thick. So don't want it too watery, otherwise we'll get cauliflowers. I'm going to make this a little bit more watery, and then we're ready to go. So I'll go back to using this brush, and I'll begin here because I'm going to move in this direction, and so I don't want to put my hand in wet paint, so this is the best way to go. If I went the other way, I'd be putting my hand constantly into wet paint. So this brush, it's called an oval brush or a cat's tongue, has a wonderful shape for painting rocks. It is really good for this. Now there is a gap between these rocks, but I didn't really want to have a gap. So it's perfectly fine to play around with the things you see and do it in a way that's more pleasing for you. So the important thing about this is we really want to do this quickly because it's drying out. It's constantly drying out. And this needs to be a bit lower, so I got this in the wrong place. So I want this to be accurate, but at the same time I'm very aware that time is passing and I need to do this very quickly. So this is where it's going to be tough as a beginner, because sometimes you just can't go that quickly, and then it's time to spray. Spray horizontally a few times, and that will help you a bit. If you do it too many times, then it all goes blurry. I've done that quite a few times. Okay, and then this bit. So it's almost touching the boat, which I didn't want, but there you go. This is what sometimes happens. So possibly I did my boat too high. At the end, we'll have a review and a bit of a think about that. Ooh. Okay, and then this bit. Okay, so that's wonderful. Wash my brush, wipe it, very important, very important. Then get this thick orange mix, and here we go, in here. And in here. And I wipe it sometimes because this is going to get dirty, and I don't want to add water and do all of that, because there's a good chance that I'll add too much water and it will give me a cauliflower when I paint this. And it's giving it a lovely orange tint. Yeah, I like it. Don't do the whole thing though. Do not cover the whole rock in orange. I might even do this just above the purple paint or the brown paint and let it run down with that one, because it's so tiny. I can't really add much. Okay, so the next thing is reflections. So we're going to use this colour, but make it maybe a touch more watery, just a touch. And maybe the easiest way of painting this is like this. That's an easy arm movement for me. And what we do is, to be honest, here we haven't really got anything, but we do have a little line like that. So I can do that. And here we haven't really got much of a reflection, but I'm going to do a little. And it eventually becomes like little separate lines, but here it's all joined together. Let's do the next one. So I'm just having a quick look at my photo. Yep, that's quite nice. I hope you can see this okay. And then do this one. You can see this one anyway. So you'll get the idea. And this is clashing with the boat, which is not so great, but just a little. And we can paint over. And then the last one, Okay. Bit of fixing up there. I was safe to do that because this mix is quite thick, but normally I wouldn't recommend you do that. So, and this one maybe just a little bit more. Join them up a bit more. I think would be better. And a little bit more of corrective work, but it's quite thick mix, so I can get away with it. And then let's get back to this. So it all has to be done fairly quickly. And I think that's it done, and that's not too bad. And it does have like a brownish look with a highlight, and the reflections look pretty good. I'm just wondering if my boat is really in a good place or I should make it lower down. Anyway, let's leave it to dry. Now I'm going to do some islands in the distance. So for that I'm going to use my cerulean blue with a touch of alizarin crimson, some more, and I probably should have done this first before I did these big rocks here, but there you go. And yeah, there we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is redraw the boat and make it a little lower. So I think maybe I'm going to make it about here. Hopefully this will get covered up later. So I think that's done. So I'll try and erase some of this, but I don't think I can because I painted over it. But we'll just see. I might be able to soften it a little bit, and that'll be good. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do next is another graded wash here. So this is a bit dirty, but hopefully not that dirty. Yeah. So have to be careful not to go over that too many times, or else we might shift the paint. And then I'm going to get this orangey colour, but yellow ochre is fine. This is just a mix of yellow ochre and red. And then let's add a bit more red to that. Wow, not just a bit. And maybe I can remove that. Get rid of that white square. So I have to be very careful here because I might shift the paint. And then I've got some blue here. I'll mix it in with this dark colour. It'll go a bit more of a grey blue colour. And get rid of this. I think it looks better now. And you have to do this fairly quickly. I might use a little bit of blue now. Yeah, you have to do this fairly quickly, light blue, before it dries. And there we go. I think that looks quite nice. So, whoops, clean my brush. Then get some tissue, and this is being careful now, just wiping along the edge, removing excess paint. And at the bottom too. Okay, so let's leave that to dry. Now I'm going to paint the boat. So for that I use my oval brush, cat's tongue. Later I'll use the bumblebee brush, the thin brush. So for this I need a dark mix, so just use this, which is phthalo blue, touch of red, touch of yellow ochre, grey blue colour. Okay, so I've got two drawings, have to be careful. So maybe here. Yep. Okay. And then down here. I made this too long, so if you're very quick with the tissue, you can erase mistakes like that. Okay, I think that's okay. And then we've got a little bit like this. And keep it wet, that's very important. Sadly, I can't see my pencil line, so I'm guessing. But I don't mind drawing with a brush. So I think that looks pretty good. It's drying out a bit there. That's nice. And let's get the bumblebee brush. And here we've got some very strange thing, and then some little bits and bobs. These bits and bobs really make this shape very, very interesting. And then we've got this thing. I have no idea what it's called. And then we've got this, and I've done that wrong. So look, you see how I used the tissue to erase that mistake? Okay, let's try again. I hope it's staying wet down here. I'm just going to go over that again, re-wet it. I wanted a little gap at the top here because it's a net, but it didn't happen. So sometimes like that, in fact quite often, but just go with it, carry on. Then I can spray now. So don't spray directly, spray horizontally and let the drops fall down. Now there's little lines here, rope lines or something, rigging, but I think it's so small that it's not a good idea to paint that. Okay, so now we're going to start doing the reflections. Add some water to this because the first one is quite watery, then it's a bit thicker and strong. The reflections are very complicated. Here it's a bit watery at first, I might even dab my brush and do that, and then it goes strong again, and the shape is very complicated. I'm simplifying it a lot. And then what happens is it goes a light blue colour. So I use cerulean blue, touch of this, so it's not too blue. And then let's go down here with this. Or going up. Oh, it's beginning to, what's the word? Look good. And there might be a few lines. Have to keep looking back at the original photo, and I still haven't understood this part very well, so but you shouldn't let that stop you from painting just because you still haven't quite got it right. Just keep going for it. Now what I wanted to do here, but I failed to do, is begin with a thin line, make it fatter, and then thin again. Oh, I managed to do it. And here too. Now I think that's not too bad. Oh, and I want to do this. So I'm going to get just a small round brush, get some blue. Yep, and just I'm going to charge this. It's just fun, and I think that just makes the whole thing look a little bit more interesting. And it's starting to come into its own. Okay, so now I think we've done that. Maybe there's a bit of a line forming here, so I don't like that. So use some thick paint, and this is quite tricky what I'm doing here. I'm trying to blend it together. And clean my brush, wipe it, use tissue too, and I'm going to remove some paint here. That might disappear, we'll see. And then here I think it needs to be a little bit lighter, just there, and also here. Okay, I'm just going to check that the video is actually still working. Oh, I think so, yeah. That can be a bit of a worry. Now I'm going to do the pattern of the waves in the water. So I'm going to begin over here, and the pattern is at a slight angle. It begins with thin lines, which are a kind of yellowy blue colour. Can't explain that, like a dirty yellow or browny colour. and then they become bluer, and they become wider and wider and wider. So I'll begin with, where is it? My bumblebee brush. Just use a thin brush, and I need something like yellow, and it's a bit dirty. Add a little bit of grey, and that's the kind of colour we want. What would you call that? Like a kind of goldish colour. Then wipe on the rag, and then the first few lines are the most challenging. Oh, you should use some scrap paper. I've got some scrap paper here. Just do a few marks. Yeah, that's not too bad. And use the tissue to just remove marks that I don't like. But remember, you've got to do it quickly. And an important point about waves here is you do waves like the way you would make a brick wall. So it's like one brick, two bricks, and then the next is between. And that's how you tend to do waves. But also you want a variety of long lines and short lines. So that's very important, yeah? So, and not too symmetrical. So very important points. And if you look, my waves tend to start thin, get fatter, and then go thin again, if I'm doing them correctly. Sometimes just doesn't come out like that. So, and then maybe a little fat one there. So, like that. And that's not too bad. I've maybe made them too wide too soon. And I'm just doing some dry brush there. That might be a bad idea. I can always remove that later if I want to. Okay, so now we're moving to more of a light blue with some of this grey in it. So here we go. So I kind of press down and then release. And I might even add the blue to them a little. Okay. Have to be careful if this is wet. I don't want them going into one another. Yeah, and here I'm going to make this darker waves. So darker blue, a bit this grey, and then here it becomes quite complicated. The waves become like stacked upon one another. So, so a little bit like one there, and then another one here, and they're kind of forming a line of waves like that. It's quite complicated. So some of these need to be a little bit darker. And then I'm going to use this brush now, and I'm going to do these waves closer together. So I'm not super happy, to be honest, with these waves. And here I'm trying to join them up. So yeah, there we go. And I think it's not too bad, but I shouldn't say that until I've finished. That's too symmetrical. Okay. I think that's okay. And then hopefully this has dried. Just touch it. So I'm going to use the bumblebee again, and just over here, maybe a few lines here. Just test the lines on some scrap paper, which I've done, and then hopefully this will blend into this island shadow, hopefully. Maybe it needs to be a bit thicker. Something like that. There we go. And I think over here I need something here. This looks a bit empty. Don't know. Ah, doesn't need that. Quick, quick, quick. Oh, and I put my hand in there. Goodness me. Suddenly it can all go wrong, yeah? Okay, cover up that mistake. And then have a look at that again, have a think, maybe something light, yellow ochre, touch of this grey, yeah, and then a few lines hopefully. So there we go. I don't like that, so I'm going to try and erase that. My water's quite dirty, but maybe it's okay. Wow, this is more difficult to remove than I expected. By doing this, I might also soften these waves a bit, which is possibly a good thing. Okay, tissue. Yeah. And I might leave it like that. So let's leave this to dry, and then I'm going to come in with some Chinese white and just add a few highlights. Now I'm using Chinese white and a big tube, 60 milliliters, and my bumblebee brush, and I'm going to add some highlights. So I try to use it directly from the tube, but sometimes it's not workable. It's too thick. Now, in my actual photograph, there are no highlights on the boat. It looks basically more or less like this, but I want to add highlights because I think it looks better. So just check on some scrap paper what kind of mark I'm going to get, and then here we go. So this has a curve. Like that. Ooh, bit nervous there. Okay, that's good. And then maybe here on the top, a little bit of a highlight there. And then a fun thing we can do is some white here. And then we wet the brush, wipe it, and then we blend this in, which is really fun. And when this dries, it will go a lot lighter, maybe too light, but we will see. In fact, I want a little bit more white in there. Okay, that looks a bit too strong at the moment, but we'll see what happens. And then a few more touches of white just to make this boat pop out a bit more. Oh, this has an angle like that. Ooh, I got some of my angles wrong here. This has an angle which I failed. I've done it horizontally. So what can we do? I think this is going to be a bit of a fudge. So I'm going to do that. And then down here do this. Ooh, it's getting a bit messy. Quick, quick, quick. Yep, I deleted that. So get my blue, get my red. So just touch up this. So the angle was wrong, even this is wrong. Oh dear. And blend that in. And I don't like that, so I'm going to get some blue. And I'm going to go in with some blue. And do that. And then blend this in. Hopefully. I think that's a little better, but you do have to fudge things. That happens. So I'm actually quite happy with that. Maybe here it needs more blending in. And there we go. I think that's good enough. Review time. So overall, I'm very happy with this painting. It has a lightness, a colourfulness, a glowing quality. So very, very happy with it overall. So let's look at the individual parts. The sky is very good. I'm very happy with that. Perhaps it needs some slightly darker clouds in there, perhaps, but I think it's good enough. So I'm not going to really play around with that. Next, the islands and the rocks. So I can see a few pencil lines, but that's okay. We can try to erase them, but I don't think I'm going to be that successful. So I'm just going to accept that. And you can only see them if you look very closely. So yeah, and I think the highlight is good. I think the reflections are pretty good. Maybe they could be a bit more interesting. I have got these little marks here, but I think that's fairly okay. This one is good actually. This one's perfect. But here there's a little bit of a mark, but I think it's okay. As for the sea, I'm happy with the colour, but I think these waves got too thick too soon. And I'm just going to play with that now and try and make it look a little bit better, because I'm not that happy with the waves. And I've got an idea that, let me just check this. I need to get this dark yellow colour. I'm just checking this on some scrap paper. Maybe this will do. I think if I do a few little lines around these big ones, it's going to look better. And you can have a good look now and you can tell me if you think that's true or not. The thing is, I don't want to do too much of this. In the distance, I'm going to just have a few lines. Okay, so I think that's slightly better. I've got to study these waves even more. I am getting better, but I'm still not there yet. Okay, and then I'll move on to these ones. So when I do a review, it's not just simply about thinking what I will do next time if I paint this picture, how I will improve it. That's a good thing. But also, if I possibly can, I'll make corrections to this very painting. And it's a good thing to try and do. Sometimes though, you will end up making it worse, but I think over time you'll get better and better at making corrections. And I think that does look better. Now I think I should have done these marks stronger, and I'm going to do that. Goodness me. That's quite a bit of work, and I have to be careful because I'm tracing, I'm going over. So I'm just using this grey mix, adding a lot more blue. And I think I'll start at this bottom area and just work my way up. Because you can hardly see these marks at the bottom, so that's not good. And there's a kind of line forming there, so a line like that. So if I can create that, that could be very nice. But once again, I'm not going dark enough with these waves. And next to the wave, you've also sometimes got these little marks as well. I'm not really happy with that. Quick tissue. Ah, maybe don't speak too soon. So I'm a little bit sad here because I think some of these waves look quite ugly. Okay. Need to make a stronger mix. And try again. And I'm having to go back over this again, which is very frustrating. Once again, I didn't do it dark enough. This is why it's so important to do a review, because you can really look carefully at the painting and see what's gone wrong, and also possibly figure out how to correct that if you're lucky. So my problem here was my paint was too weak and it needed to be a lot stronger. Okay, well, I think that's better. I need to stand up and look down. Yeah, I actually think that's quite good, but I need to do here. And maybe even possibly. So I think this now, ooh, put my finger in it. I think now this is quite good actually. A little messy, but good. And I'm just going to try and darken some of these waves. Not easy, because I'm having to go over them. And try and cover them up. Yeah, I think that will do. And then what about here? Maybe a few lines here. This too maybe needs to be darker. And I think that will do. Yep. So there we go. So the sea, I've done my best. And I do think it looks much better now. These waves here needed to be much darker. And the boat, I think the boat is actually really good now. I could try and do a gap here, because this is a board here. And this is tricky and it might not work, but let's have a go. So I need maybe some white. Well, actually what I could do, first of all, is I could try and just erase the paint. So here we go. So I've got to get that angle right. It's a bit of a hassle. Ah, that's it. It's not as light as I'd like it to be, but not too bad. And I think I might even do a touch of yellow and add that here. Ooh, putting my finger, my hand in wet paint. Have to be very careful. Just needs a touch of colour, I think. So we got a little bit of blue here, a little bit of yellow here. It just makes it look a bit more interesting. And I think that's everything. So yeah, so I will sign this maybe here with some white paint when it's dried, but that's basically everything. So please have a go. Remember, the most important thing is to just enjoy it. Secondly, to experiment. And thirdly, to do a review and look at, first of all, the overall painting. How do you feel about it? And then, like me, look at each element: sky, rocks, sea, and then boat. And just look at it and see if it looks good, if you've done it correctly, and if you haven't, how could you improve it? And if possible, you can actually improve it now, then do so. If not, then maybe have another go and try and improve it in the second one. So I'll be back in about, I don't know, 2 or 4 weeks with another watercolor lesson. So happy painting and bye for now.